Hey, everybody, please remember to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy.
Chris Speaks here tonight with Dr. Lucas Wilder back for one of our chats coming on, and we're going to have something a little different tonight. Lucas, how are you, man?
I'm doing just great, Chris. I'm happy to talk with you. It's been a while since we got to talk, and I've been looking forward to this. I can't wait to talk about some political generals and about the Civil War.
Okay, great. So, political generals. So these are appointees, right?
Yeah, these are men that Abraham Lincoln thought that were felt he needed to appoint to gain some kind of political or economic gain from it. For instance, he appointed one of the more famous ones, John McClerland. John McClernand is from Illinois, just like Abraham Lincoln is, and Lincoln chooses McClernand because McClernand is a Democrat.
Ah,
Illinois. Southern Illinois is very Democratic, and Abraham Lincoln is honestly afraid that Southern Illinois may even sway the rest of the state, or if the war goes badly, it may take over the state, the Democratic Party, and vote and put in congressmen, senators that might make the war come to a halt. And so that's one reason he appoints McClernand. Is McClernand's very patriotic. Now he's very ambitious and he's out for himself a lot of times, but he's very patriotic. McClernand's a fantastic politician. When he's in Congress, he's actually the one who helps construct the Compromise of 1850. He doesn't get much notoriety from it. The notoriety comes from Stephen Douglas and Henry Clay. But John McClernand is one of the men who constructs that and helps hold the Union together. He's been trying to hold the Union together for the last 10 to 15 years before the Civil War ever breaks out. And so he's a natural choice. He's patriotic. He's a Democrat, which Lincoln hopes to be able to use and keep in Illinois in the Union. So he's a wonderful choice. Lincoln also appoints a few others. Probably most people know about Dan Sicklels, and we also have Nathaniel Banks. Nathaniel Banks is uh, and James Shields. I forgot about Shields. Shields actually had a duel, or at least was supposed to have a duel with Abraham Lincoln. They met on the dueling ground, but it ended
oh, really?
civilly. Yeah, but Lincoln appoints him as a political general. Now, James Shields did have a military background, though. So he had fought in the Mexican American War. He had got some notoriety from his military time. So he wasn't a military novice, but he definitely wasn't a formal military man that went to West Point or anything. But these political generals did get a lot of flack from these West Pointers who felt that they deserved those ranks. And I can't blame them. If you've been in the army for 10, 15, 20 years, some of these men, and you're not raising up higher than a brigadier general, and you see a politician who gets appointed to a major general or brigadier general initially and then raises up to major general very quickly, that is definitely going to hurt your self-esteem and also make you not feel too good about the the government that you're fighting for. And so McClernand had to fight against a lot of that, and any political general did.
You
But
always thought there'd be a lot of animosity between went on with that.
yeah, and I think you see it with McClernand and Ulysses S. Grant. Grant's a Grant does not get along with McClernand, and there's some reasons why, but McClernand's a capable commander. He's not he asks he gets books sent to him, military books. He learns the tactics. He learns how to drill soldiers. He is not in the least just taking this as an easy gig. He is wanting to be a military leader and do the best that he possibly can. He's not slacking off. And I don't think any political general is completely slacking off. Many of them put their all into this commanding. It's just some of them have it and some of them don't. It's just like with West Pointers. Some West Pointers have it and some West Pointers don't. It just completely depends. And I don't think a lot of these men, we look back on it with 2020 vision, a lot of these men don't get the recognition they deserve. Um, many,
Hey, let me ask you a couple questions right quick.
sure, yeah.
Um, so when these guys go off to fight in the war, do they give up their seats in Congress?
Some of them do. Some of them hold on to them for just a little bit, and then some just give it up entirely. Um, one of the gentlemen that gets recommended to be a commander is John Logan, also from Illinois, and he will go on to be a fairly notable political commander, political general. But John Logan will remain in Congress, even though he's favored to be getting a political position, a military position. He will keep in Congress for a little while longer. McClerland will. McClelland was, I think he was technically out of Congress when he gets his. But most of the time, yes. Once you become a general, you usually let Congress do its thing, and someone else gets your seat, either appointed by the state or they have an election.
So why become a political general? Visions of grandeur and glory?
A lot of it is, especially with the Civil War. I can't say that none of these men who join the Army, all of them will enter the Civil War in hopes of gaining some kind of recognition. And that's talking about political generals, that's talking about West Point generals, and that's talking about the average soldier that joins the Army. All of them think that this is some grand event that's going to happen, and they're going to come back home with all these accolades. And I think it's not just for political generals. Every one of them have that ambition to be more grand than what they went in. Even the more what we might think of honorable commanders, still have that mentality. I think to some extent, there's different degrees, of course, but you can't tell me that when one general, he's not a political general, but Winfield Scott Hancock, as he's rising up the military ladder, he's getting rank in the volunteer service, which he goes all the way up to major general. But as he's doing that, he's also getting in the formal military, he's going up to like brigadier general rank, and he's gaining all these ranks, and you can tell in his writings and the way he says, the way he talks about it. I mean, this is adding a lot to his career. Because the Civil War, the armies before the Civil War, the Army itself only had about 16,000 men in it. There was no real way to rise up. You were going to be stuck at a fairly low rank for most of your life. You might raise up to, major, a captain, or a major, hopefully maybe a colonel by the time you leave. But general is not going to be an easy thing. That's why men enlisted and why men threw their lot in with which state or union they wanted to join. So I don't think that's just alone to political generals. That's any general or any person who joins up in a Civil War army.
Okay.
Any other question?
Yeah, one just got me thinking when you talk about Grant, like McClerland. What rank was Grant when the Civil War broke out? I know Lee was a lieutenant colonel, and I forgot what Grant was.
Grant was out of the Army.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
Grant,
right. Why was it? How did that slip my mind? Okay.
He was chopping wood to earn a living basically when the war breaks out, and
I forgot all about that.
Lincoln. Yeah, he was kind of forced out in a way. It depends on which historian you kind of glean with. Either he was getting drunk. We do know he started drinking a little bit in the Army. However, there are some reasons for it. He had gotten married. He had had a child, and he was sent to California. And so he's away from his family. He wants to be with them, and he turns to drinking to kind of to calm himself, to get his mind off of that kind of stuff and get him out of the reality that he was in. So he did. There's definitely drinking involved, but I don't know if it's blown up to what a lot of people portray it as. But yes, but yeah, he left the Army in the mid 1850s.
That's right. But no, that's all I got so far. So
yeah, McClerland. Reason I'm talking most about McClerland, as you know, and I hope the subscribers and the viewers will know, is that I'm doing a biography series on McClerland. McClerland is probably one of the more famous political generals just because of how high he rose in the ranks and all the stuff he did. But we can also talk about, again, Dan Sicklels, Nathaniel Banks, who I do want to touch on quite a bit, but we'll stick with McClerland right now. McClerland is when he joins the Army, he's basically put under Grant. He serves under Grant in some capacity his entire time in the Army, except for when he gets sent further west. Most people lose track of him once Vicksburg's over with, but he actually goes to Texas and is operating almost in a political way because he's along the border with Mexico, and Mexico is having their own turmoil with France coming over and taking over, and so there's two warring bodies within Mexico, and so this is going on the same time the Civil War is. So he's somewhat doing a political job being along the border, although it's not a prominent job, but he's still got some kind of role, at least politically, within some kind of diplomacy, where there's a lot of Texas cotton growers who are going across the border to sell their goods, and he's trying to stop them. So he's trying to control the economy in northern Mexico, southern Texas. But we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves there. But yeah,
kind of off topic, but still on it. And I don't know if this is in your expertise, but concerning that with Maximilian and Napoleon III and Maximilian in Mexico, did the Lincoln administration ever make any statements about that? Because it was a violation of Monroe Doctrine, or did they just kind of have their hands full and ignore it?
a lot of it was his hands were full. I honestly, even though I study Lincoln quite a bit, I don't know um, his opinion of that. That'd be something interesting. Maybe we need to look into that. Maybe do a short video on his ideas towards Mexico. But he knew that there was going to be problems, and so that's why he assigned once the Texas coast was captured by Union forces. That's why he put a decent sized force down there, is because there was some diplomatic reasoning for it. He had to kind of play the politician, which he was very good at. But John McClerland is a very ambitious man. He has rubbed elbows with every politician. He is not afraid, even though he was just a congressman, he's not afraid to talk with the president personally. And he knew the president personally, which was during the Civil War. But he had talked to presidents before that. He never let his station, whether it's just as a congressman or when he's just a lawyer in Illinois, it doesn't let him stop from communicating with these higher officials. And this is what gets McClernand in trouble the most. Abraham Lincoln, they were not friends. Now their wives were friends. Mary Todd Lincoln and McClernand's wife were friends, but Lincoln and McClernand were not friends. They knew each other. They traded clients back and forth. Like, maybe you should go see him, or you maybe go see them. So they knew each other very well. But when you join the military, that should stop. As you know, just because the president is your acquaintance or you know them very well, it doesn't mean that you can communicate directly with them with military information. It should go up the chain of command. McClernand never follows this chain of command. He is always wanting to communicate with Lincoln, and one reason he is because he wants the president and he wants the country to know what he's doing on the battlefield. Again, this is ambition. He's wanting to raise his star even higher up in the sky, or make it brighter, whichever euphemism you want to use. But he's wanting to make himself look better, especially politically. I think he was an aspiring politician to a great degree. He wanted to be a little bit more than what he was. He even ran for
ambitions?
Possibly. I've not read any of his stuff that kind of shows that he wants to be president, but he definitely had political ambitions. He wanted to be Speaker of the House at one point, and I can see him definitely wanting maybe a governorship or a senator's position. But either way, he wanted the world to know what he did, and he, at every opportunity, whether it's at his minor victories in Kentucky, where he at the battle, or in Missouri, but he's also operating in Kentucky, these small little skirmishes, or the Battle of Belmont in Missouri, whether it's Fort Donelson, Fort Henry that he's part of, Shiloh. He's always writing to Abraham Lincoln, telling him what he's done, and he does badmouth some of the upper generals. He doesn't start badmouthing Ulysses S. Grant, though. he might have some problems with Grant, but he's definitely not bad mouthing him. Eventually, he will, and think he's not doing as good of a job as a commander, and this creates a schism between the two. But every commander, I think Halleck will say it to him. I think even Edwin Stanton will admonish him a little bit, be like, "You've got to follow the chain of command. You can't just write the president officially." And he doesn't pay any attention. He just keeps doing it. And this will actually come back to bite him. Grant will, during the Vicksburg campaign, will say no letters can go out of the Army unless it passes over my desk. And McClerland will put a congratulation letter to his men through the newspaper. It didn't go across Grant's desk, and that's kind of what got him. Grant had all this stuff against him, but it was that moment that kind of pushed it over the edge and allowed Grant to oust him and get rid of him. But I've already had discussions with some of my viewers on the channel when they talk when I've put up some videos on McClerland. There, one person said, "Do not dare call him a competent commander." I was like, I have to. He was decent. I mean, I'm not saying he's a genius, but he's definitely capable. He's definitely capable of fighting a battle and winning. And the viewer brought up Port Gibson, and I completely agree. McClerland did not do a great job at Port Gibson, but the terrain, this is in Mississippi, along the Mississippi River, the terrain does not allow you to see what enemy is in your front. And he didn't know, and he was denied of cavalry. Ulysses S. Grant didn't allow him to bring his cavalry over first, so he's fighting this battle with no eyes or ears for cavalry. He is moving with infantry, and he doesn't know what's in front of him. So this battle goes poorly. Even though he outnumbers the Confederates greatly, he does not win a solid victory against them because he doesn't know the ground. But you can look at it. You can also look at Arkansas Post. He captures Arkansas Post against Grant's orders, although in fairness, he did not know that Grant had ordered him back to Milliken's Bend on the Mississippi River before he actually takes two Union Army corps and captures Arkansas Post. We find, I mean, he does capture that. He does a really good job. He adapts. He adapts very well for being a political general who had never been in combat before. He adapts to situations. He had Sherman and George Washington Morgan as his two corps commanders while he fought at Arkansas Post. And Sherman's not able to get around to the location that McClernand had hoped he would to attack the fort. And McClernand adapted. It's like, okay, we'll switch it up a little bit and moves Sherman to a location he can get to. He's not able to completely encircle the fort, but he is able to capture it pretty easily, I would say. So he's definitely a good commander. He's not great, but he's good. But I would put him kind of almost above average. Give him a B as a commander, maybe a low B, but he's a B. But we also then we can look at the other side of the coin. McClernand gets a bad reputation after Grant kind of talks bad about him. Sherman will talk bad about him. He does not have a good reputation when he leaves the Army. And that's similar to what we get when we look at Dan Sicklels. Dan Sicklels is another political appointee, and we know him for two reasons, mostly. One is I'll say three. We know him for three reasons. The first one is that he kills Francis Scott Key, the man who wrote the Star Spangled Banner, our national anthem, in the United States. He shot his son, killed him, and so we know that. And then we know him for the second thing. We know that he did fairly poorly at Chancellorsville as a commander. And then when we move to Gettysburg, he's in charge of the 3rd Corps of the Army of the Potomac, and he's up on on Cemetery Ridge. And he moves his corps further closer to the Emmitsburg Road, claiming that he didn't want to, that there was higher ground in front of him, and he didn't think his position was tenable. There's a reason for that. I'll actually give him an out partially. I mean, he shouldn't have done that move. But at the Battle of Chancellorsville, one reason he was able to be, knocked back by Robert E. Lee's army is because he did not seize the high ground in front of him when he should have. And so at Gettysburg, he sees that high ground in front of him, and he's like, I've got to take it. This is the best possible option. It wasn't. He was too detached from the rest of the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg, and Longstreet battered him back. I think there is an anecdotal story of General Hancock who's someone points out that the Third Corps is moving on his left, and he says, "Don't worry, they'll be rolling back soon." And that's exactly what happened. And he loses a leg at Gettysburg, and he doesn't have we now as military command as military historians will look back on him and be like, okay, he didn't do the right thing, but at the time he was seen almost as a martyr in some, because he loses his leg. He gave something to the Union war effort, and so he gets a decent reputation after the war. It's not like McClerland, who struggles his entire life afterwards to try to regain that reputation, even though I would say he was a much better commander than Sicklels ever thought about being. Um, we get Nathaniel Banks, James Shields, and James Shields had um, well, it was almost fought a duel. Duels were odd back then. If you ever read a history of duels, you'll find that they they are supposed to be, we commonly think of almost like the Bugs Bunny cartoons. What I'm automatically go to is you stand back to back with a gun, walk 10 paces, turn around and fire. That is not what duels always are, or what they could be. They can be a multitude of things. But in this instance, James Shields and Abraham Lincoln, James Shields thinks that Lincoln has insulted him through a newspaper. We think that it might have even been Mary who actually wrote the letter about James Shields. Either way, they can't do it. They can't have a duel in Illinois, so they go across the river to Missouri, where they could actually have a duel, and they get to the location, and Lincoln's able to choose the weapon, and Lincoln chooses a broadsword. Broadswords, because he thinks he might have a reach advantage on him. Lincoln's not any kind of fighter or shooter. Well, he's a fighter, but he's not a marksman. So he's thought he better use his brawn. So he chooses broadswords, and it ends civilly. I would say most duels actually end with no one getting hurt. If you simply show up at the dueling ground, it establishes that both of you have honor, and so
Right.
you end it that simply. So. But James Shields, most people know him from the Shenandoah Valley campaign with against Stonewall Jackson, and that's where we also get a lot of Nathaniel Banks's um, uh, stories, and his command ability is from the Valley campaign. Banks is actually the commander against Stonewall Jackson in the Valley for a great deal of it, and people criticize Nathaniel Banks for his inability to fight off Stonewall Jackson or push him out of the valley. Banks is not given the amount of troops he really honestly should have. Nathaniel Banks, what people have to remember when we talk about the Shenandoah Valley campaign, which I'm doing an animated battle map for the complete Shenandoah Valley campaign that'll be coming out in May.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's completely from beginning to end. It's going to be completely animated, and so you can
How long
watch.
did that take you to put together?
I'm still putting it together. It's a long process, but
I bet.
but yeah, from the Battle of Kernstown to McDowell, Front Royal, Winchester, Cross Keys, and Port Republic, all of them I've done the animation for all of them. Now I just have to put the videos together, and so it's going to be good. But what people have to remember is that the Shenandoah Valley campaign was happening at the same time two other major campaigns were happening in the East. One is what most people remember is McClelland's Peninsula campaign, where he's moving his way up the peninsula and trying to capture Richmond, Virginia. The other one is what was supposed to go in conjunction with McClelland's attack, and that was Irvin McDowell had somewhere around 40,000 troops that were supposed to attack from Fredericksburg from the north and attack Richmond from that direction. And Banks was supposed to get rid of Jackson in the valley. So there's three campaigns, and even four if you want to count in John C. Fremont and what's now West Virginia. So I mean, this is a lot of moving parts. And Jackson, I don't think he had this planned, but he does fool the Union High Command. What he will do is he pulls back pretty far, and he pulls back to Swift Run Gap, which is basically the way from the Shenandoah Valley back to Richmond. And Banks and a lot of other generals assume, he's not coming back. He's left the valley. We've pushed him out. We've beat him at Kernstown, and we've pushed him up the valley all the way up to Swift Run Gap. He's probably leaving. And so when that happens, guess what? Abraham Lincoln pulls troops away from Nathaniel Banks, gives them to McDowell, because McDowell's going to make that big push to Richmond. And that's when Stonewall Jackson goes on the offensive. And it works. Stonewall marches his men up and down that valley and defeats small Union forces. He tries to overpower as many as possible by singling them out, and he does. But I can't say that Banks was horribly at fault. He did the best he could with what he had, especially once Abraham Lincoln takes his troops away. And Shields, again, we'll move back to Shields a little bit because he's involved in this campaign. If Shields moved faster, I think of the the four political generals we've mentioned so far, I think Shields is honestly one of the worst. McClerland is definitely better than people give him credit for. Sicklels, is okay. Banks, I don't think he got a fair shake. And then Shields, he was slow. He didn't move his troops very fast, and he was a very big braggart. Yeah, McClerland bragged about himself, but I think that Shields was much more. He wrote a letter to the newspaper congratulating his soldiers at one point, and even his soldiers said, "This is basically fantasy what he's written that we actually did here." I mean, it was not so. When his own soldiers recognized they didn't do what their commander actually said they did. He's making stuff up. And so we get the best of both worlds. But most of the time, every political general that we see on both sides, although this conversation we're just talking about Union political generals, they did the best that they could with what they had. That's the honest darn truth. If we want to look at a political general in the Confederacy, the one I know the most about at least is probably Leonidas Polk. Even though he did go to West Point, he resigned quickly after he graduated from West Point, became a bishop, and he's essentially a political appointee. His best buddy Jefferson Davis wants him to be a commander in the Confederate Army, and because of their friendship, he keeps him in there. And Polk is not a great commander. Is he horrible? No, but he's not good at what he does. He's a low C on my book as far as a commander goes. McClerland blasts him out of the water at every step. So I don't think political generals get enough credit. Is kind of what my thesis of this discussion is.
What do you know about Barksdale?
I don't know a whole lot about his. A lot of his abilities in the Army of Northern Virginia, other than he comes from Mississippi. He's a politician from Mississippi. I think he was born in Tennessee though, and he joins the Army. A lot of these men join and then kind of rise up because they are politicians. And Barksdale, as a brigade commander, and I'm going off two engagements that I know decently well about him, and one's at Fredericksburg where he's doing the urban warfare. The other one is when he's at Gettysburg. The Gettysburg charge that Barksdale's brigade does is probably one of the more impressive charges that you'll ever hear about. I animated that battle map at one point. That's a couple of years ago, but it's still up if anybody wants to go see it. It is miraculous. And if you go to Gettysburg today and you start where Barksdale's men did, start at the Mississippi Monument, and you walk all the way to Plum Run, near where just if you're traveling like the Mississippians did, just to the right of the Pennsylvania Monument, that's a long distance. And for them to have pushed the Union soldiers that far and fought for that long, that's impressive. That is undoubtedly an impressive feat. And I think it's due to his ability to keep his men together. I'm putting together some animations for Devil's Den, Little Round Top, and the Wheat Field for July coming up. I'm ahead of myself right now in my video making, and I'm looking at John Bell Hood, who's a division commander, and I'm looking at how he coordinates his brigades at Little Round Top and at Devil's Den, and it's all over the place. These men are thrown in piecemeal to some extent, and so I know we're getting way off topic now, but we before we started recording, we talked about John Bell Hood for just a moment and why everybody kind of is drawn to him. He's a tragic figure, and everybody's like he was a great division commander, but he couldn't command an army. And to some extent, I don't think he could. He was a great division commander.
Really?
If we just look at Gettysburg, I don't see him as being a great commander. He's his brigades were thrown in mishmash. He didn't look like he helped put them to hold them together. I know he gets wounded, but still, in the early stages, the attack on Little Round Top goes awry. Two brigades break up, and half is fighting with one group, and the other half is alone. And so if we're just looking at Gettysburg, I'm a little concerned that Hood is that good of a division commander. But I will say this: he was a great brigade commander. I might might argue that, and he's able to inspire his men, and he's very tenacious. But I've done a biography on both Patrick Claiborne and A.P. Hill, who are known as probably the two best division commanders in the Confederate Army. You know, Claiborne's division and Hill's light division are two of the most two of the most famous in the Confederacy, at least. And I think Patrick Claiborne blows at both Hood and Hill out of the water. There's no one that controls their brigades in battle better than Patrick Claiborne, and you can't look at nothing. If you don't want to look at anything else, just look at Stone's River. I've got an animated battle map of Stone's River, and it shows how well Claiborne keeps his men together and knows how to attack, when to attack, and where finds critical points in the enemy battle line to attack. So I know we got off on a tangent there, but you can't talk about Barksdale's charge without talking about what precedes it, which is the attack on Little Round Top and Devil's Den. So,
hey, let me ask a question: how far in the attack was it before Barksdale went down?
Oh, he makes it quite a ways into the attack. I mean, he makes it all the way until he's around Plum Run, so this is almost to the Union line. So I mean, the charge basically ends once he is hit. Once he goes down, the charge, the attack fades away, and that also goes to show you it was him holding it together. If you have that commander involved, if the commander is that involved in the regiments that he's commanding, he's going to do well. And Barksdale did, like I said, one of the more impressive advances in the American Civil War. I'll throw a Union division commander in here, Francis Barlow. Francis Barlow was an incredible division commander, especially for tenaciousness. A lot of people credit John Bell Hood with being tenacious. If there's anyone that's tenacious, it's Francis Barlow. My goodness. He, when you told him to go someplace, he went and he hit it as hard as he possibly could. There was no quitting this man. He was left for dead at Gettysburg, and he survived. I mean, his comrades were like, "Well, he's a goner. Might as well just leave him," and he recovers. So, yeah,
that happened to several people at Gettysburg, didn't it?
Kemper gets wounded. He gets shot in the groin, and he gets traded back and forth. Some people capture him, some people don't. But there's a lot of people that, just going through the Gettysburg battle itself, there's so many men that get killed. So many generals that get killed or wounded there. And just in A.P. Hill's corps, the Third Corps, you get Pender, who goes down with a horrible leg wound that leads to his death by, I think it's July 17th is when he passes away. So you got him going down. Then Pettigrew dies on the way. You got Barksdale goes down. You got um, uh, Barlow who gets wounded. Trimble gets captured. Wounded. I think does he get wounded and captured? You get Armistead.
He got wounded and captured because
Yeah.
he got hit in the leg, and he said made a statement later if they had he got twice he got wounded in the leg and they had to amputate that time. And he made the statement if they had cut that damn leg off the first time, he wouldn't got hit.
Don't you love Civil War generals?
Yeah, especially him. I'll do a video on him one night because Trimble's one of my favorite characters of that war. I read something one time that said by the time they got to Gettysburg, old man Trimble was so fired up he would follow Bengal Tiger.
But yeah, I mean,
I think the South lost 7 casualties total was 17 generals at Gettysburg. Going off the top of my head, killed, wounded, or captured. That's a lot of senior leadership to lose.
Yeah, and you got 2 Union Corps commanders with Reynolds getting killed, and you've got Winfield Scott Hancock who gets badly wounded, nearly dies from his wound. I mean, these are you get General Zook who's under Winfield Scott Hancock that gets killed. I mean, and Winfield Scott Hancock is the savior of Gettysburg if there ever was one. When Hancock is the one who sends one of his entire divisions down to Little Round Top, the Devil's Den, and the Wheatfield to push back the Confederates. They are eventually pushed back, but it's after horrible losses, and he loses at least 2 of his brigade commanders in that attack, maybe more than that. But yeah, just incredible commander, and I have so much more respect for Hancock after I did that biography on him. But
that was a good one.
So yeah, it's but kind of going back to political generals, a lot of people give them a bad reputation, but for the most part, they all tried their best to do their best in the situation that they were given. And
you know how you said Grant didn't get along with McClerland. Did he have that, feel that way towards all political generals? You know how Lee looked at them? Because, I'm thinking these guys here went to West Point, served, 30 years in the military, and then here this guy comes in and just made a general.
No, I don't think Grant had that animosity towards every political general. For one, he really liked John Logan. Black Jack Logan. And he was a political general, and that's actually good friends with McClerland. But Logan was arguably a better commander than McClerland was, although he didn't get as much opportunity to do independent commands. But no, I don't think so. But when Grant gets rid of McClerland right after Vicksburg, or during the Vicksburg campaign, all of his corps commanders are West Pointers after that. So that might tell you something.
Okay.
Or at least on that campaign. So
yeah.
But no, he was and if you watched my Hill biography, there's one moment, and then here we'll talk about a Confederate, I won't say political general, but because he technically wasn't politically appointed as a general, he joined the army and was raised up like many of them did. Hill is really aggravated at Ambrose Wright. Ambrose Wright's one of his brigade commanders, and Ambrose Wright basically did Pickett's charge on July 2nd. And so he made it past the Cadore barn. I mean, basically went over the same ground that Pickett's men did the next day, and did fairly well. I mean, he wasn't an outstanding commander. He was just mid-grade, but he was unable to take a hill during the Overland campaign, and Hill got very, very mad at Ambrose Wright. And he basically told General Lee, I'm going to drag him before a court-martial. He's going to have to answer for what he did. And General Lee stops him and says, hold on. Wright is not a military man. He's a lawyer from Georgia. We can't hold him to the same standards as a West Pointer. We can't He says that if we insult General Wright, the people of Georgia will not understand, and this is where politics comes in. The people of Georgia will not understand if you call him up in front of a court of inquiry and humiliate him. So you have to do what I do, is what Lee tells him. Says you need to take him aside privately, tell him what he did wrong, and make him promise he'll never do it again. And that's how we deal with the situation. And so that's his what Robert E. Lee advice he gives to A.P. Hill as a Corps commander. And so again, he's not a political appointed general. Wright isn't, but he's not a military man. And so Lee is a very good politician in the Army for knowing how to deal with these men.
Yeah, sounds like it. I just didn't really know what Lee's thoughts was on him. I could just see them having some disdain for these guys. Just waltzing in and get a generalship, and he served his whole career and just made it to lieutenant colonel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess of course you had to have an army of what 100 several armies going, so yeah, you had to have a lot more army.
Oh yeah,
pump them out. All right, man. That's pretty good there. Ted, I'll ask you something else. Is there anything else we should add to this?
No. It's a good conversation. I loved where it went and where all we got to take it to. So nothing else to add, I don't think.
All right, man. Well, we'll try to get back in touch with you in a few weeks.
That sounds great, buddy. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you.